Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. I'm Jeff Waldorf. We've got a great show for you guys today on this Wednesday. I do apologize for not being here yesterday. I was not exactly feeling the greatest. I have a medical problem, a couple of medical problems. And hey, you know, wouldn't it be great if everybody had insurance to be able to take care of their medical issues? Wow, that would be fantastic. Something like a Medicare, maybe for everybody, universal health care that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Just a thought. It would be wonderful. We're definitely cut down on having to take days off to deal with those issues. And not just for me, but for everybody who has certain medical issues. But anyway, myself aside, I do again apologize for not being here yesterday. A lot of stuff happened. Has happened in the last couple of days, so I intend to get to some of that as well. We'll have a, we'll talk about Steve Bannon, of course, in his war with the Republican establishment. We got Trump in the pressure cooker White House. That's an interesting story. Then there's a little new angle about Rex Tillerson, the moron comment, moron gate. You won't believe the reason why Tillerson called Trump a moron. Allegedly. It's kind of awesome and super, super scary. Then we've got how Americans feel about taxes on the rich. That's going to be no surprise here, of course. Then we've got, actually, I want to open up with the California wildfires. I think that's really, really important to talk to. Then we've got Senator McCaskill getting a primary for her efforts against Bernie Sanders and progressives. That's what you get. And then a very interesting story on Terry Crews, which is related to the Harvey Weinstein case. And I think that it's actually hopefully sparks a very good discussion on sexual assault and who can be affected by sexual assault. So it's really interesting stuff. So I'm going to talk about that. Now, first, let's see. Before I get into the stories, I want to thank some patrons. And before I thank some patrons, I want to remind everybody that you can help out the show if you're not on Patreon. And if you're not doing the super chat, which is also super cool, you can like and share this stream. So give us a thumbs up, give us a share on different social media, YouTube, Facebook, etc. Share our videos. That helps us out immensely. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. That's something that I definitely would like people to do if you want to catch more content and make sure you keep up with Around the Nation. All right. All that said, let's go to some patrons. Let me see if I can find some that I haven't said before. We've got, I don't think I've mentioned Claire Hodge in a while, Victor Whitmire, Thomas May, Brett Dunn, Khalid Nixon, Michael Remy, I believe I've said that before, Frank Tenzer, Gary Worrell, Wendy Girardin, and Ahmed Henry, and George oh man, I'm sorry, Georgi Kalishvili. Oh man, that's a hard one. But thank you anyway. I'm sorry I butchered your name, but I love you anyway. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/TYT Nation. Again, huge thanks and props for shouting out the show or for supporting the show. All right. Anyway. So let's see. Let's go into the wildfires here, which is fairly disastrous for what happened, and I think quite newsworthy. All right. Now, California is in the midst of a deadly wildfire season as fires rage into the northern part of the state. Now, according to the Washington Post, at least 17 people have died so far, and they're expecting more. as there are plenty of people that are still unaccounted for. 2,000 buildings have been destroyed, a lot of businesses, a lot of wineries, I guess. A lot of people are making a big deal about the wineries that employ about 50,000 people. So it's important to the economy. And of course, thousands of people are still being evacuated from different areas as the fires continue to regain some of their strength, thanks to some of the high winds that are coming down. Now, they also mention that this is California's deadliest wildfire since 2003. Washington Post writes, the fast-moving flames have swept through densely populated neighborhoods over the past 2 days, causing residents to flee from homes in the middle of the night as smoke filled their rooms. There's a lot of personal stories about people having to jump through their window into their pool to avoid the flames. I mean, could you imagine? They also said that the high winds that whipped up 17 large fires had faded earlier Tuesday, and humidity increased, assisting an operation that has drawn resources from throughout the state and neighboring Nevada. But officials warned that the sharp northern wind, known as a Diablo, would return, and apparently it has. So, again, that makes it very, very difficult for firefighters who are doing their best to be able to stop the fires. Now, that wind, like I said, did return along with lower humidity, meaning that it is easier for these fires to continue to spread. The National Weather Service expected these red flag conditions, including gusts up to 40 miles an hour, and in some places, even hurricane-strength winds. I'm not kidding. Now, they're expecting these winds to remain until Thursday in the North Bay area, which includes the already hard-hit Sonoma and Napa counties. Now, so far, the total count of how many people had to be evacuated, 25,000 people or more have fled homes from 7 counties north of San Francisco. Of course, where do they go? They end up having to go to shelters. They end up leaving with nothing but the clothes on their back, maybe 1 or 2 possessions, an iPod or a phone or something. And look, officials acknowledge that it could be weeks before some are able to return. But then again, what are they going to return to? As a lot of neighborhoods have been completely decimated by this. Now, according to CAL FIRE Chief Ken Pimlott, during the afternoon news conference, these fires came down in the neighborhoods before anyone knew there was a fire in many cases. This is just pure devastation. It's going to take us a while to get out and comb through all of this. Exactly. Now, these fires just come on the heels of an incredibly destructive fire season, a wildfire season for California and much of the West, where more than 8 million acres have been burnt this year. So now that is, like I said, a complete disaster. Now, investigators are actually looking into what caused the fires. And that's an interesting question. So far, they're saying there's like a 95% chance that it was not a lightning strike, and that normally that amount of that 95% is actually 95% of all wildfires, I should say, are actually started by people inadvertently. So if you throw a cigarette butt out the window or something, most wildfires do not start by lightning strikes, but by people, and that's terrible. That's so you got to be really careful. I mean, you know that only you can prevent forest fires. Smokey the Bear, he was right all along. So, you know, if you're going to go out, you're going to go out camping, whatever, make sure, you know, if you have a campfire, that's put out all the way. Don't throw cigarette butts. I know a lot of people love to do that. That's ridiculous, and it's one of the reasons that I hate smoking. Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to cause a wildfire, and who knows, that could end up burning down your house. So just be careful, okay? So, like I said, these wildfires, they're having a devastating effect in California. And to be clear, look, a lot of wildfires happen in California. It gets very hot. It gets very dry there. And it doesn't take much to get one of these goings. And you add in the Diablo wind, which already sounds terrible enough, and it's going to get worse. And, of course, what made these fires more destructive than normal wildfires that seem to happen every year is where they actually ended up going this time. they ended up right in the heart of wine country, and going into these neighborhoods and just absolutely destroying them. And I've looked at some of the video from some of these neighborhoods, and it looks like a war zone. There's burnout cars, there's destroyed buildings. I mean, it reminded me of playing like Fallout. I mean, it was that bad. It looked terrible. And look, you've got desperate people that were actually able to return, and it is still dangerous to return because there's still a lot of smoke. There's still a lot of like buildings that are smoldering, creating more smoke, especially when you have low-lying areas. It makes it very difficult to breathe. And it also makes it very difficult to go and put out some of those smoldering buildings and things like that. So a very dangerous, very, very, very dangerous situation. And of course, you do end up having people that had to leave that are trying to come back, and they're trying to find something that's left of their house, and there's nothing left. I mean, most of the people that have been affected have literally lost everything. So my heart goes out for that, for them. And so, look, on the politics front, like I said, I'm not doing this to make a political point or anything like that. The response from President Trump he hasn't really made much of a response. President Pence, or Vice President Pence, I should say, that's a weird Freudian slip, came out and actually did say, hey, we're doing our best. There's a state of emergency, and they're getting all the help that they can, and that's fine. Look, besides all that, there's not a whole lot that can be done for this. Again, you've got those winds, you got the dry conditions. All of that makes it incredibly difficult to fight the fires. But I'm pretty sure that the people on the ground they're doing their best. They're doing their best. So it's going to take a lot of time, and it's not over yet. It's going to take a lot of time to rebuild this stuff, and you can't really rebuild the lives that have been destroyed by this. Again, people have been killed, 17 people. But all we can do is just hope that that these fires don't go back to any more populated areas and destroy any more homes or businesses, and don't kill any more people, and that as many people as can remain safe from these fires. So, and that eventually the firefighters and stuff can get a handle on it. So, but anyway, that's the situation in California. Let's move on to some politics. Okay. Now, the president's feud with Bob Corker continues as Steve Bannon decides to jump into the fight. Now, basically this all started on Sunday when Bob Corker gave an interview to the New York Times. Now, he said, President Trump, he's heading us in the wrong direction. He's heading us in the direction of World War III. Is like, and everybody knows it, and everybody's trying to contain him, that, all that stuff. Now, that World War III quote, that's actually literally the most damning, because this is from a very, very conservative Republican, right? And in fact, throughout that entire interview, the theme of how incompetently dangerous this president is just kept coming up, as well as the fact that everybody in Congress, they know this, right? And they still haven't done a damn thing. So very interesting of Congress to not do anything. Now, Corker's criticism did not go unchallenged. Like I said, Steve Bannon jumping into the fight. He went on Hannity and he decided to talk about it. Let's watch.
This is what they think about President Trump behind closed doors. He happened to tell the New York Times exactly what I thought. It's totally unacceptable. In a time of war, we have troops in Afghanistan, in the Northwest Pacific in Korea. We have a major problem that could be like World War I, in the South China Sea, in the Persian Gulf. We have American lives at risk every day. He tweets on Sunday that it's like the adult center and somebody didn't have the morning shift. And then he has the audacity to go to the New York Times and to give this
He didn't know that was going to air. He didn't know they were going to release that.
I think, by the way, I'm not sure that he knew it was going to be a tape, but he gave those guys an on-the-record interview. You saw that in the New York Times. And by the way, Phil Rucker, yesterday in the Washington Post, the buried lead was, he said, there's only 2 or 3 senators on Capitol Hill that have President Trump's back. When you want to talk about why there's no repeal and replace, why there's no tax cut, why there's no tax reform, why there's no infrastructure bill, you saw it right there. Corker, McConnell and Corker and the entire clique, establishment globalist clique on Capitol Hill, have to go. And if we need any more proof about what they think, you heard it tonight, it's an absolute disgrace.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff to break down. For one, let me address that it was totally unacceptable for anybody to, especially like Bob Corker, to go and criticize the president during a time of war. Yeah, you heard that right. You can't criticize the president in the time of war. And this is coming from the CEO of Breitbart, who did nothing but criticize President Obama during his entire term. What was happening during President Obama's entire term? And this is something that I've criticized Obama about. Oh, right. We were at war. We were at war with Afghanistan. We were at war in Iraq. And we were bombing like 7 different countries, most of which we didn't even know. Yemen, drone strikes, all that stuff. That's funny because you seem to have no problem with criticizing Barack Obama during a time of war. And now you're saying, oh, yeah, but Trump, look, we got Americans dying over in Afghanistan. I mean, you can't criticize Donald Trump while American troops are in trouble. The hypocrisy, man. The hypocrisy. Now, he says some other interesting stuff. Now, he says, look, Bannon said Corker holds the view of many lawmakers in the Republican establishment, saying they have total contempt for the forgotten man in the base. That's actually true on several points. Yes, the Republican establishment hates regular people. We already knew that. I point that out all the time. And yes, most of them also do feel that same way about Donald Trump. So, to be fair, yes, it's true. Now, what's funny is that he's like, well, this is why we don't have repeal and replace. This is why we don't have tax reform. No, we don't have those policies, not because the Republicans don't want it. You talk to Republicans about a tax cut, they're going to be like, oh, tax cuts are amazing. They're wonderful. I love tax cuts. There isn't a tax cut for the rich, and I got to point that out. There ain't a tax cut for the rich that the Republicans don't like. Okay? No, what this is, it's not about opposition to Trump. It's because they can't actually do anything because the President Trump is a bumbling fool. And not only that, but their positions, McConnell's positions, are actually incredibly unpopular. I mean, you talk to regular Americans and you ask them, hey, does ExxonMobil need another tax cut? Do people on Wall Street, do they need another tax cut? Does Donald Trump need another tax cut? They're going to tell you absolutely not. That is not what we're in favor of, but that's what their tax plan is about. Same thing with the ACA. The replacement plan had a 17% approval rating. There were, there were town halls where people were like, do not take away the ACA. Do not do it. In fact, you have the opposite happening now. You have a majority of Americans that are in favor of a Medicare for all system, where it actually expands healthcare and actually does all the stuff that President Trump promised his own healthcare plan would do. But anyway, not only that, but look, the failure of a lot of Republicans to do this is because Donald Trump would continuously undercut them on Twitter. The overall point here is that, yes, Trump is not playing three-dimensional chess with these Republicans. No, he's an idiot. He's not playing three-dimensional chess. He's playing checkers. Or he's not even playing checkers. He's playing Go Fish. Okay, completely different game. And like I said, for Bannon to place this squarely on the Republican establishment when it's his own guy's failures is completely asinine. Yes, of course, Republicans and their shitty policies do share part of the blame, but Corker is right. The president is dangerously stupid, and he continues to prove that over and over and over again. For the safety of the country, he's got to go. And one more thing. When Bannon said, when Hannity said, well, Corker didn't know he was going to be taped. Oh, no. Tape came out, and he's like, I hope you guys are recording this. I do want this on the record. Corker don't give no shits anymore. He's like, yeah, we all feel this way. Trump's a moron. What are you going to do about it? Hey, at least that's the kind of honesty that I was always looking for from everybody in office, and at least we got it. Of course, that's when he's got nothing to lose. If only these politicians were to be honest when they're not facing, or when they're actually facing re-election. Okay, anyway. Now, President Trump is a dangerous buffoon. We all know that. I know that. You know that. I think most of us are patently aware of just how dumb this president is, right? But until recently, we didn't know why the Republicans in Congress couldn't seem to figure this out. I mean, they wouldn't speak out. To be fair, a couple did, right? Bob Corker just did. Of course, he didn't have anything to lose. There's some others, Lindsey Graham, but then again, Lindsey Graham just went golfing with the president and was like, oh, he shot a 73. What a wonderful golf game. So, Lindsey Graham, I think he's out on that praise. But look, for the most part, most Republicans just sat there and were like, I'm not saying anything. Don't hear anything. Can't say anything. Don't hear anything. I'm not going to say anything. Whatever. And then, of course, there are some that would even heap praise upon the president. And they didn't even mean it. Now, look, we've had dumb presidents before where the Republicans could, stand behind them anyway. But look, look, George W. Bush comes to mind as one of those dumb presidents, right? But Trump is beyond Bush. Trump makes Bush look like an intellectual. So, again, for the longest time, I couldn't understand how the Republicans couldn't see it. And then, of course, we got our answer. Bob Corker, like I said, gave us that answer when he said, hey, look, we all know. Okay, all the stuff that you're saying, we see it too. We know he's dumb. And in fact, we have people in place to try to keep him from doing stupid things. We're trying to be the guardrails here to prevent Trump from being really, really stupid. Well, good work. He's still doing super stupid stuff. Now, again, think about that, right? We have to have guardrails in place to contain the president. Now, the problem here is that the more those guardrails get reported, the worse Trump gets, the more belligerent he gets. And in the end, it ends up killing his agenda. Now, for me, I think that's fantastic because I'm not in favor of his agenda. But if you actually do care about his agenda, then this should infuriate you. In fact, according to numerous White House officials and outside advisors talking to the Washington Post, Trump, through his actions, his tweets and things, are burning bridges with Congress and is essentially making sure that none of his agenda actually gets done. Now think about that. No, Republicans love tax cuts, right? They've never met a tax cut they didn't like unless it went to the middle class. Trump might actually ruin that. That's amazing. Like, how could they bungle it so bad that they could possibly lose on the tax cut issue? Disaster, right? But this is what's happening. Now, according to these sources, Trump, because of his losses on things like the ACA, he is frustrated by his cabinet and angry that he has not received enough credit. Credit for things like handling of 3 successive hurricanes. Well, how's that went? It actually went pretty terribly. Puerto Rico, right now, there's a lot of people still without power. There's a lot of people that are still not getting the necessary supplies for survival on that island. So there's a serious issue, and now they're talking about a serious health issue. It's been reported that there's a lot of bacteria in some of that water, and we're facing a possible health crisis. Now that is, again, these people are American citizens. We got to do something. Now, think about that as well, the implications here. People died in those storms, whether it be Florida, Texas, Puerto Rico, right? Homes were destroyed, lives were destroyed, etc. And all Trump thinks about is, hey, where's my credit? Why are you not praising me? I did a fantastic job when I was throwing paper towels at the people in Puerto Rico. Why are you not giving me enough credit? It's petty. It's incredibly petty. Look, we know that if you want to get anything done, you've got to stroke Trump's ego, right? Now, if you don't, he ends up getting pissed, he lashes out, and makes it so that he cannot get anything done. In fact, the Post writes, in a matter of days, Trump has torched all the bridges around him, nearly imploded an informal deal with the Democrats. I guess you don't deal with Trump. You just don't make deals with Trump. Now, this was the DACA deal, of course, and he plunged himself into the culture wars issues from ranging from birth control to the national anthem, going after the NFL. Now, there are some out there that are convinced that Trump is using this as a savvy move to try to appeal to his base. Somewhat true. But I don't think it's politically savvy. I think it's just more of an effort to go to the people that praise him the most. And that's, of course, his base that gives him the affirmation that he so desires. Now, Trump, again, thanks to Tony Schwartz, who wrote The Art of the Deal, he knows how Trump really is. He says Trump is transactional. If you do something for him, then he might actually do something for you. You're the best person in the world if you stroke his ego, right? So the other part here is that he's pissed that there are so many people out there who are not stroking his ego, and he's looking for somebody to blame for all the different failures in his administration. One Trump confidant likened the president to a whistling teapot, saying that when he does not blow off steam, like doing all those golfing trips, he can turn into a pressure cooker and explode. This person said, quote, "I think we're in pressure cooker territory." Now, it's that tendency to turn into a pressure cooker and explode that has a lot of people worried, especially people who are very, very pro-Trump. One Trump loyalist, noting that Corker has many more friends in the Senate than Trump does, something that's actually important if you want to get your agenda passed, said that the rift could dash chances for a tax law overhaul or other meaningful legislation. His presidency could be doomed, said this person. I think it already is. But that's just my read of the situation. Now, Patrick Cattle, veteran pollster who's worked with Steve Bannon, says, quote, "We have been watching the slow motion breakup of the Republican Party, and Trump is doing what he can to speed it up." Again, that speaks to whether or not, people think that he's doing this on purpose as some sort of move to break up the establishment. I can tell you that, yes, he is having that effect of slowly breaking up the Republican Party. But the fact is, he's not doing it on purpose because he's not smart enough to do it on purpose. This is not a strategy. He's not doing three-dimensional chess. He's playing Go Fish. This is, again, he's not smart enough for this kind of strategy. Now, Cattle says, quote, "Trump is firmly placing himself on the outside, trying to become an almost independent president. He knows that many people will be with him, that he helps himself when he's not seen as a Republican president. But what's his program? But what about his program? That's the question, and possibly the cost of what he's doing." Well, that's an interesting question. But again, I don't think this is a grand strategy. He's not looking more independent. He's being an idiot and a bumbling narcissist. Again, if somebody says anything remotely negative about him, or just doesn't praise him enough, he goes into full attack mode. Even potential allies that could help him actually do the things that his base wanted him to do. Now, speaking of his base, when he goes into full attack mode against people like Corker, McConnell, that energizes his base. Now, his base, they hate all establishment politicians. And I hear you on that, right? So that fires them up. He gets the affirmation that he needs, but he ends up doing nothing to actually serve the base that voted for him, policy-wise. But again, we don't care. He doesn't care about policy. Now, one more thing. According to sources, the president has groused to numerous to numerous White House aides about his concerns over his popularity with, quote, "my people," his base. He also made it known to several people that he wished to have a rally in North Carolina over the weekend and not just a fundraiser. He only went to the fundraiser, but then complained that he had wished he had done a rally. He had gotten back in front of the rowdy crowds that he loves. See, to Trump, this is all just a campaign event. All he wants to do is to go out there, be in front of people who chant his name. That's it. That's all he's ever wanted. Now, according to Republican pollster Whit Ayers, Trump got elected with a minority support from the American electorate, and most of his efforts thus far are focused on energizing and solidifying the 40% of Americans who were with him, primarily by attacking the 60% who were not. That is great for his supporters, but it makes it very difficult to accomplish anything in a democracy. And that's it, though. Those people, they love him. They shout his name. It's like a cult of personality, which is super sad. They hinge on everything he says, and they accept it when he blames someone else for his failures to get anything done. But it is his temperament and his aversion to actually learning about policy that prevents him from actually enacting policy. He does not care enough to actually do the things that he had promised to do. For example, he called opiates, the opioid epidemic, a crisis, but has actually not officially declared it so, which would actually allow more resources to flow into those areas and to help people who are addicted to opiates. And those are some of the people that actually voted for him in some of those states that have been hit hard by this addiction crisis. He has not done anything for them. So it just shows you how he does not actually care about following up on those campaign promises, but really cares about things that give him some sort of symbolic win, whether it be making a so-called good deal or cutting his own taxes. Hey, that's a win for him, man. Or keeping out the scary Muslims. Now look, make no mistake, man. The Republican establishment is terrible. That's who he's fighting against. But nonetheless, that doesn't make Trump any better. That actually makes him, he's actually worse than a Republican establishment. And I didn't think that I'd ever want to be able to say that. But it's true. And because of who he is and how he reacts to things and criticism, he's setting himself up to be one of the worst presidents in modern American history. And that's sad. Okay. One more on Trump. Now, there are new details about Rex Tillerson's supposed moron comment about the president. And these new details are actually incredibly disturbing. According to NBC News, President Trump was not happy with the steady decrease in the U.S. stockpile of nuclear weapons. So over the summer, he had instead asked for an increase in nuclear weapons and how many nuclear weapons that we have. Now, again, this is a guy who's like, why can't we just use nukes? We've got nukes. What's the point of having them if we're not actually using them? I think I've reported on that before. Now, this request to increase the U.S. nuclear stockpile had, quote, startled his advisors and was followed soon after with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson calling him a, quote, fucking moron. According to 3 anonymous officials, upon seeing a briefing that charted the huge decline in the U.S. number of U.S. nuclear weapons, Trump asked the military again to expand the arsenal to nearly 10 times its current size. 10 times. Oh, man, look at how few nukes we have. We need more nukes. Does anybody have more nukes? Let's get more and more nukes. No, that's not a good idea. But no, he's like, more nukes, more nukes, more nukes. It's great, great. Yes, because having the capability of destroying the world only several hundred times over is not enough. No, we need several thousand times over. What a blithering, dangerous moron. Now, let me tell you why. Arms control experts maintain that an increase in U.S. arms would bring about another arms race with both Russia and most likely China and could spur other countries to have nuclear weapons. Now, wait a minute. Aren't we supposed to be in favor of disarmament? I mean, that has been our official policy ever since Ronald Reagan. Okay? Every president has sought to reduce the numbers of nuclear weapons, not only in our own stockpile, but in the world stockpile, so to make sure that we don't accidentally or on purpose destroy the fucking world. Okay? But no, Trump wants to reverse that and says more nukes. Wonderful. In fact, apparently the administration is now looking into creating smaller, quote, potentially more usable nuclear weapons. But okay, non-proliferation. What do you not understand about the idea of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons? It means you don't develop nuclear weapons. Now, what we've done is we've actually gone and improved them and made them a little bit, I guess, safer, so maybe they don't accidentally explode in their own silos. Wonderful. There's no way that you can actually make a nuclear weapon safer, because that's not the point. But at the same time, that's what we've been trying to do with our own stockpile, and I would support eliminating completely throughout the entire world. No nukes, right? Now, the thing about Trump is that I don't think he understands how nuclear weapons actually work and what do they actually do. I mean, once you nuke something, I don't know if he realizes that afterwards, there are people, like, you can't live there for a very, very long time, you know, because of the nuclear fallout, right? I mean, we're still dealing with nuclear accidents, things that aren't even, you know, that weren't even nuclear attacks, that are still radioactive. People still can't live there, okay? Now, I don't know if he knows that. I don't think he does, but even if it does, it wouldn't matter to a sociopath. Now, Trump, of course, has denied this report. On Twitter, he tweeted, "Fake NBC News made up story that I wanted a tenfold increase in our U.S. nuclear arsenal. Pure fiction, made up to demean NBC equals CNN." If that tweet is not hilarious enough, now he goes on to actually say something even more dangerous and not funny. The president wrote, "With all the fake news coming out of NBC and the networks, at what point is it appropriate to challenge their license? Bad for the country." So now he goes from denying and saying, "Oh, NBC News, bad. NBC News is same to CNN. Fake news." But wait, aren't you in favor of nuclear weapons? I thought you were. Again, you were somebody who's like, hey, let's use more nuclear weapons. What is it? What is it, dude? No, fake news. Everything's fake news. Everything's alternative facts. But then he goes from that to, we should take away the First Amendment protections from NBC. That is not how the First Amendment works. That is not how any of this works. In fact, let me tell you how it works. Television and radio stations require a license from the FCC in order to broadcast. They are issued to individual stations and local affiliates, not entire networks. So NBC doesn't even have a network. Not only that, but this, again, runs afoul of the First Amendment. The 2008 FCC document states that the First Amendment protects broadcasts that criticize or ridicule established customs and institutions, including the government and its officials. It also said the FCC generally will not intervene in allegations that stations have aired inaccurate or one-sided news reports and comments. So not only is Trump being ridiculous, he's also being dangerous. We have a president that's more than happy to escalate nuclear tensions, flirt with war in North Korea, that would, by the way, cost millions of lives. It doesn't even have to be a nuclear exchange. All they'd have to do, you know, North Korea, is just use all their conventional weapons and they would flatten South Korea in a matter of minutes. But not only that, but now he's out to destroy the First Amendment rights of anybody who would actually point out how ridiculous and dangerous he actually is. We have got to get this guy out. He is unstable and he is a danger to the world. We're dealing with a man-child here. Okay. So let's move away from Trump here. Oh, thank God. There's only so much you can handle, man. Okay. Let's go to some good news. Now, President Trump and the GOP continue to promote their tax plan that would drastically cut taxes for the wealthy and corporations while simultaneously blowing up the deficit. Now, it's the same tax plan that the Republicans have had for years. Let's cut taxes on the rich. Let's cut taxes on corporations. Let's eliminate the estate tax. Let's do all these special tax breaks for you know, our donors. So because that's what they paid for. That's what they pay us for. Now the plan actually calls for cutting the corporate tax rate to 20% from 35% and creating a new category for pass-through income earned by partners and sole proprietors, which would be taxed at 25% instead of the 39.6% top individual rate paid by some. It also proposed cutting the top individual rate to 35% and would eliminate the 40% tax paid on estate assets worth more than $5.5 million or $11 million for a married couple. Because of course, you know, those people are the middle class that Trump is trying to protect. Now, he claims that, no, this tax plan, it's not a tax plan that benefits the rich. It's a miracle for the middle class and will spur economic growth by creating a better tax climate for businesses. That, of course, is not true. We actually have evidence that companies who received tax cuts before, instead of creating jobs, they use that money for acquisitions. Now, when they acquire other companies, that also tends to lead to job losses. Now, they also use that money, it's been shown, for stock buybacks into their own company. So the claim that it's going to create jobs is a bunch of bullcrap. Now, here's who's winning with the GOP tax cuts. According to the Nonprofit Tax Policy Center, taxpayers in the highest 1% of incomes making more than $730,000 annually would receive about half of the total benefit from Trump's proposed overhaul, with their after-tax income expected to increase an average of 8.5%. I think it is pretty obvious who this entire thing is designed to benefit. Now, Trump is expected to travel today to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to try and sell this tax plan to the working class folks there. Well, that should be very, very interesting. According to the Business Insider, the president is expected to describe how, if his plan became law, truckers would benefit the proposal to lower tax rates for the middle class, which it does very little of, cuts taxes paid by the manufacturers whose products they transport, create a new tax category and rate for pass-through companies, and eliminate a tax paid for by the wealthiest 2.2% of estates, according to a senior administration official. So he's going to have to turn that and try to convince truckers to support it. Good luck with that. That's all I'm saying. But look, we've had a lot of studies and a lot of breakdowns from different nonpartisan research groups that actually crunched the numbers, at least the numbers that were actually there, as this entire tax plan has been incredibly vague. And they found out that, again, this was nothing more than a bonanza for the wealthiest Americans. And if you ask the American people, they're not interested in this kind of tax plan. There's a new Reuters Ipsos poll conducted from September 29th to October 5th that found that 53% of adults strongly agreed that the wealthiest Americans should pay higher taxes, not lower taxes, higher taxes, more taxes. Additional 23% somewhat agreed that the wealthiest should pay higher tax rates. So basically you have somewhere around three quarters of Americans saying, no, we don't want to give the rich another tax cut. In fact, we want to raise their taxes. They are not paying their fair share. Now, I wonder who the GOP and who Trump's going to listen to. It ain't the people. Okay. Now, this poll joins many, many others for many years in saying that, look, hey, the rich and powerful, they've got too much influence on our government, too much influence on our politics, and because of that, they pay too little, and they end up shifting the cost over to us. Now, the American people also know that tax cuts do not create growth. Even Ronald Reagan, the patron saint of tax cuts, figured that out when during his administration, after his gigantic tax cuts, he ended up having to raise taxes 11 times to try to cover the shortfall. Oh, boy, what happened to that dynamic effect? Oh, right, it didn't happen because it's bullcrap. So again, how's the GOP going to sell it? Well, they're going to lie, they're going to obfuscate, and they're going to, of course, blame fake news for misreporting the impacts of his tax cut. That's what he's going to do because that's what they do every time. But thankfully, the American people have access to facts, and they also kind of know when they're being screwed. Okay. Oh, I didn't make a sidebar for this one. Sad. All right. Senator Claire McCaskill is now facing a primary opponent from the left. Now, McCaskill's been a target of progressives since, she is one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate. So, yeah, it makes sense. We're going to come for her, okay? Because she's not representing us, and she's not representing liberal progressive values. Now, for example, she during the primary, she talked about Bernie Sanders being a socialist, as if that's a bad thing, and calling out all of his proposals, which are incredibly popular with the American people, and are actually done in many other countries, pie in the sky and unrealistic. She was a gigantic Hillary Clinton booster and would always go out on Morning Joe and MSNBC to go attack Bernie Sanders. Now, she also would attack Bernie Sanders in his policies during town halls. For example, there was one in April 2017 where she told her constituents that policies like free college tuition are just too expensive. Quote, free college tuition is a great goal, except it's really expensive. It's really expensive when we are struggling over how we're going to pay in terms of what we have right now for Medicare. We can't just start having the government pay for everything. When people talk about that, they point out countries where that happens, people are paying 70% of their income in taxes. Now, that right there, that's a bunch of conservative Republican talking points, and they're also not true. Let's take one of the highest taxed countries in the world, Denmark, okay? The average Dane pays about 45% of their income in taxes, not 70%. Now, you might think, oh my God, they almost take half of your income. Holy hell. But what do they get in return? Well, they end up getting free education, right? Paid for by taxes, universal health care, an extremely generous maternity leave package. They get about 52 weeks. They get things like free child care so that women can go back to work after they've, taken their maternity leave. They have all sorts of social programs. And so, they're actually incredibly happy. In fact, they're one of the happiest countries on earth. Now, the average person, like I said, does not pay 70%. That's where she's wrong. Only the very top gets actually close to paying that amount. And I do remind you, back in the 50s and 60s, our millionaires and billionaires here in America paid close to 90. So basically, like I said, she's using very conservative, very Republican talking points that sound a lot like Hillary Clinton. Remember, a single payer would never, ever happen. It's too expensive. It's pie in the sky. But the truth is, these policies actually save money by removing the profit motive and giving the government more leverage to be able to negotiate prices. However, Claire McCaskill, she's not interested in that. What she's interested in is winning elections and making sure she takes donor money. Now, there's a progressive challenger out there who actually might get in the way of that. Now, but first, just weeks before she went after Bernie's proposal, she pleaded for help from Bernie Sanders supporters. Now, this is rich. She said, all of you who are Bernie supporters, I need you, I want to talk to you, I want you to be part of our effort. Okay. Hey, look, I'm one of the most open-minded Bernie Sanders supporters in the world. Okay, well, you could have came and asked me. I would have told you what we want is, we want Medicare for all. We want a higher minimum wage. We want $15 an hour. There's a living wage to start with. And we want tuition-free higher education. We want to make sure that people who go to college don't have to go into debt in order to do so. That's pretty simple. That's what we want. Well, she says, absolutely not. She is against good policy. So, naturally, progressives are going to be against her election campaign. Hey, it's nothing personal, Claire. You're not a bad person. You just don't represent us. You represent the donors. And that is a system that we're fighting against. Now, because of that, she knows that a challenge is coming. In fact, earlier this year, she complained about the prospect of facing a primary challenger when she said, I may have a primary because there is, in our party now, some of the same kind of enthusiasm at the base that the Republican Party had with the Tea Party. We are seeing that same, and many of those people are very impatient with me because they don't think I'm pure. Well, look, Claire, it's got nothing to do with purity. It's got everything to do with whether or not you're representing the will of the American people. The people that elected you. The people that you're supposed to work for. That's all we care about, is whether or not you're representing those people. This isn't a purity test. It's a, are you actually representing me kind of test. And from her stance on Medicare for all, it appears that she is not. And now her challenger is going to challenge her on that. Now, this is according to Mike Sonato, writing for Progressive Army. He writes, a progressive primary challenger has emerged to hold McCaskill accountable in the Democratic primary and represent progressives in the Missouri Senate race. In which, yes, there are progressives in Missouri. There are progressives everywhere. We are everywhere, and we're pissed. Now, the challenger is named Angelica Earl. Now, she is, and she's very interesting because she is actually going after, specifically on the healthcare issue, and she has a lot of experience with that. Because she used to be a former verification specialist for the ACA. Now, in an interview with Sonato, Earl says, quote, I had to do expirations at one point. So this is explaining why she is now on board for Medicare for all. She said, my second expiration ever, this is where they cancel people's insurance. The second one I ever had to do, it was on a 3-year-old boy. That upset me to have to expire a 3-year-old child. They had to lose their insurance. So here I am sitting in front of this button. I had the person next to me who was helping me learn expiration saying, you have to hit the button. You have to expire them, but I couldn't do it. My supervisor then came over and said, you have to. So I ended up having to expire that person. I did 4 more expirations that day and walked away for about a week. That was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. There's no reason children should be getting expired. There's no reason people shouldn't have health care. So I'm saying from all those people I've talked to, the hundreds of people while working at the marketplace, single-payer healthcare is the way to go. Like, could you imagine having to push that button? Knowing that, hey, when I push this button, there's somebody on the other end, a 3-year-old child, that is no longer going to have health insurance. So anything that happens to that child, they will no longer be covered when it comes to health. That's horrible. That's awful. Especially when, look, you can be expired for almost anything, even improperly filled out paperwork. In fact, Earl says that she could be forced, or that she would be forced to expire health insurance for things like incomplete applications, to require documents from being not being submitted. Yet those same requirements were muddled and incoherent. So it was very difficult to, tell people, like, hey, this is the stuff we require, and to have them actually be able to get all that information in because they didn't know themselves. Now, she also said, now a lot of people say the Affordable Care Act can be fixed. I can say from an inside knowledge of how disorganized, dysfunctional, and how completely irrational the working environment was, the ACA probably cannot be fixed. It was changing every day, multiple times a day. It never had a consistency. If you missed work for a week, you're coming back to a totally different playing field. It's a great thing that we had, but it's not a solution. The solution is seen in countries all over the world, but not here. And that system is one payer, one insurer, no premiums, no deductibles, co-pays, financed by progressive taxation, and in the case of Bernie Sanders, rolled out over a 4-year period, with people being able to transfer over to an expanded Medicare system like people who already do. Now, that's interesting because there's a lot of people that make the argument that, hey, man, if you do Medicare for all, it's going to completely disrupt the system. It's going to disrupt private insurance profits, but as far as regular people go, we have thousands of people that transfer over to Medicare already. Whenever somebody hits the requisite age, I believe it's 65, to go and apply for Medicare and enroll, they do. And then they're immediately transferred over. So you go from being on private insurance over to public insurance. We already do this. And with a long phase-in period for Bernie Sanders' bill for Medicare for all, it would go about the same. We already know how to transfer people over. So that talking point Makes absolutely no sense. But as far as the system goes, we already know that a system like this will work because it works in other places. Okay. And look, this is something that we desperately need to adopt. And that's when we need politicians that will actually stand up to the insurance companies and to the pharmaceutical industry and actually represent us, which unfortunately Claire McCaskill does not do. Now, one more thing here that Earl told Sonato. She said, I will say Claire McCaskill seems like a very nice person. She, in my opinion, is not evil. However, she is very, very detached from what Missourians actually need. So I guess once you've been involved in and engulfed yourself in money for money for so long, and of course you have Citizens United, which just keeps pushing more money at you, I can see how it would become very easy to not realize what the people down at the bottom actually go through. And she's talking about, of course, the influence of money in politics from, again, large pharmaceutical companies and health insurers that will pay off our politicians. When you're getting all that money thrown at you, she says, yeah, it makes sense that you're going to lose perspective. And that's the problem with money in politics. Again, it's not the people that are in this system that are bad. I don't have anything personally against Claire McCaskill. I just think she's wrong. And I think her positions are more harmful than they are helpful. So, and this is what Angelica is saying. When you're in that system, when you're in that bubble surrounded by all of this corporate money and all of these, consultants that get paid and all these companies that are willing to give you money for your endorsement or for you to do something for them, you're going to lose that perspective. And that's why we have to change that system. Now, look, and right now, it's very, very difficult to be able to actually do that because right now we have a system in Congress that relies on that money. Okay. Now, that's why we cannot rely on establishment politicians to actually fix that problem or any of our problems because they won't. That's why we need real progressives and an actual political revolution so that we can fundamentally transform our system away from one that serves the corporations and the wealthy into one that actually serves the people. And so, for all the Bernie-inspired politicians that are fighting for real change, we're behind you 100%. Okay. One more. It's probably one of the most interesting stories of the day. Now, in the wake of revelations about Harvey Weinstein and the many female stars and employees that have come forward about his alleged sexual harassment and assault, including the devastating tape that came out, actor Terry Crews, among many others, has decided to speak out about a story of his own. Now, this is interesting. Now, he decided to share his story on social media because he wanted to let his followers know that Weinstein is not the only perpetrator in Hollywood. In fact, this apparently seems to be quite a problem. Now, he tweeted out on Tuesday, "This whole thing with Harvey Weinstein is giving me PTSD. Why? Because this kind of thing happened to me." He said, "My wife and I were at a Hollywood function last year and a high-level Hollywood executive came over to me and groped my privates." Crews continued, jumping back, "I said, 'What are you doing?' My wife saw everything and we looked at him like he was crazy. He just sat there and grinned like a jerk." Now look, imagine this situation, right? You've got Terry Crews. He's a big freaking dude. And this is a guy who could easily whoop that ass, right? So why didn't he? Well, for one, he pointed out, if I did that, I would, one, probably never work in this town again. And number two, I would end up in jail. He said, 240-pound black man stomps out Hollywood honcho would be the headline the next day, adding that he wouldn't have been able to read it because he would have been in jail. Instead, what he did is that he just kept his mouth shut and he and his wife decided to leave the party. Now, Crews says he talked to other people who had worked with the unnamed executive, and the next day, that same person had apologized to Terry Crews, but never really explained why he did what he did. Maybe he did it on a dare. Maybe he did it because he could. I don't know. I don't really care about his reasons. You just don't go up and grab Terry Crews' junk. What are you doing? Like, in what world is that acceptable? Now, Crews made a really good point when he said, when he explained why he didn't go public with this. He said he didn't want to be ostracized from the business, which he described as something that would be par for the course when the predator has power and influence. He said, I let it go. And I understand why many women who this happens to let it go. Who's going to believe you? And he says, few. What are the repercussions? Many. Do you want to work again? Yes. And are you prepared to be ostracized? No. And unfortunately, all these things happen. You end up not getting a job, or you end up losing opportunities. You get kicked out of the town. You get ostracized and blamed. Well, you had it coming. I mean, it's your fault. Now, like, I dare one of those people who always blame the women to come up to Terry Crews and say, hey, man, you had it coming. You were flashing your, what, jeans everywhere? You were wearing tight jeans? You were wearing tight shorts? I dare somebody to go up and tell that to Terry Crews to his face. But anyway, look, this is an interesting story. And the reason I brought it up is because here you have a guy who I would think that nobody in their right mind would consider messing with. And yet you had this producer, right? This probably very well-connected, very powerful in the industry, very wealthy producer coming up and doing whatever the hell he wanted to Crews right in front of his wife. I mean, that's insane. Now, if somebody's ballsy enough to go up and grab this guy, right, and get away with it, imagine how someone who didn't have the power and the name recognition of Terry Crews, how would they react in this situation? Think of a young aspiring actress, right, from middle America who's, you know, at these Hollywood parties, she's trying to get her star to rise. And what, this guy can come up and just grab her, and she can't do anything about it. She has no power. And again, that's what he is talking about. He's saying, look, you can't do or say anything because of how much influence and power these people actually have. This is a power situation. Now, I might not be alone in noticing. I hope I'm not alone in noticing that whenever there's a huge power and wealth disparity, you're going to get people who are going to use that disparity to basically do whatever they want, to get their own way. They're going to use it to their advantage. This is sort of like Trump saying, hey, I can grab him by the pussy because, well, when you're rich and powerful, they let you. Maybe it's not so much that they let you. It's maybe that they're powerless to do anything about it. And if they say something or do something, maybe they realize that they'll never get their career started, or they'll get blackballed from the industry, and so maybe they let it happen, or they don't want to get ostracized after it happened, so they don't go and report it. It's like it's par for the course. And that's why so many people get away with this, right? That's why Harvey Weinstein got away with this for so long. That's why Roger Ailes got away with it for so long. Bill O'Reilly. The list goes on of powerful people who get away with doing this kind of thing because they have that influence, they have that power, and their victims are often too scared to be able to go and talk about it. And just look at how the reaction to some of these women, like in the Cosby case, for example, questioning their motives. Oh, why are you coming out now? Or you were asking for it, you know, and it's always that scares people away from being able to report these kinds of crimes, this victimization. So I think Terry Crews actually added something really important to this conversation. And that is, it doesn't really matter who you are, you're always a potential victim for someone to abuse their power on. And unfortunately, for right now, that is a terrible truth. And not only in this industry, but any industry, when it comes to the news industry, when it comes to Hollywood, when it comes to the executive boardroom, you know, big companies, anywhere where there's such a big power imbalance, there's always somebody there that can take advantage of the situation and to be able to use that power and influence to be able to have their way. And there needs to be a way for people to, for number one, get away from that stigma, right? And get away from that victim blaming mentality, and actually take people who report these things and actually look into them, and to actually be able to try and find the truth, and to actually look into justice. Nobody wants people who didn't actually do these things that get accused to be guilty, and we can, you know, or to get in trouble, to lose their livelihood and all that. But you also want to have justice and encourage people who legitimately have this happen to them to be able to speak out and to be able to get justice. And we can change this culture. It doesn't have to be the way that it is now. We can show the predators that as a country, we will no longer stand for this. And I think the more that people speak out about this, the more effective that message will actually be. So I think, like I said, Terry's story is actually really, really interesting. And I think it does add a lot to this conversation, because this is not somebody you would think who could be victimized. But again, this is anything can happen. All right. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Make sure to please give us a like and a share. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. Hit that subscribe button. Really helps us out. We'll have the clips from today's show, if you missed any part of it, put up throughout the day on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TYTNation. If you want to help us out, support the show, patreon.com/TYTNation. That's how you can become a patron, become a donor, and continue to keep the show on the air. Like I said, lots and lots of love to all the patrons out there who support the show. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have another great show, so stay tuned. You know, be back here 3 p.m. Eastern, right here, TYT Nation. All right. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. We'll see you tomorrow.